Life gives us moments when we have the opportunity to make a choice. And what we choose has the potential to change our lives forever. Join us now for another inspired episode of The Breakthrough. And now, please welcome the creator and host of the show, Jessica Dugas.
Welcome back to The Breakthrough Show, everybody. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I am super excited that you're with us today. We have an incredible show for you. Of course, we have an amazing guest, which you're going to be so impressed and moved by her story. She also has a book coming out. I can't wait for you to tune in for that. But I also have another special guest joining me today for our end pieces of the show. We have the Empathetic Herbalist. She has been I would say, interested in holistic and energy modalities for a long period of time, many different ones, which is so right up my alley. I'm so excited to welcome a wellness practitioner to the show today, Lara Guthrie. Lara, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I got the chance to do an interview for your podcast, which was so much fun. And I knew that I had to have you on the show for something because we could just talk and we could have fun with all the things.
Oh yeah, I definitely enjoyed that. Hopefully that's going to be coming out soon. I've got it edited, ready to drop. So
yay. The editing is a fun process. Like it's one of those things, it's such a love-hate thing for me because I love the creativity for it, but at the same time, I'm like, I have to edit this week.
They're done that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it definitely makes for a better experience when you have such an amazing guest, because like when you're editing, you're listening to the interview over and over and over again. And so it's good when it's interesting, right? Because then you don't mind so much. Yes. So you are known as the Empathetic Herbalist, and I have known myself to be an empath for a long period of time, and I just more recently got into herbs, and I felt called to herbs for a long period of time, but it's one of those things where I'm not real good with plants. I can keep children alive, but plants not so much. And so I was kind of afraid to get into that world because I thought if I can't grow them, then I certainly don't need to be learning about them. But tell us how you got into how did you get that title and how did you get into the work that you do?
Okay, confessions of an herbalist time. So first of all, I don't do well with plants in pots.
Oh, good.
So it's not just you. Like, plants can be very finicky. They are naturally supposed to be in the ground. And so when you have them in the pot, the different water levels and the different, composition of the soil and whether it's getting enough sun, that can all be amplified when it's in a pot. And so I have never been very good at keeping herbs in a pot. My mom and my grandmother both had beautiful herb gardens when I was a kid. And so I grew up around it. My mom used Nature Sunshine products, which is one of the lines that I like to use a lot when I was a child. So I've grown up in the herbal community, kind of, I guess. We didn't have like a huge herbal community, but I was around it a lot as a child. And I don't think that it's necessary for people to have a like beautifully green thumb to be able to utilize the herbs and the plants that we can bring into any sort of practice. I think that it's important to remember that it's a little bit like eating better or doing yoga, for instance. You don't have to be all twisty and bendy. You don't even have to have great balance. There are adaptive yoga options. And as long as you are in the spirit of the practice and working towards that kind of mental, emotional connection, then you are practicing yoga. And to me, herbalism is very similar. As long as you are working towards that connection and that kind of, it's not religious, don't hear me wrong, it's more spiritual, but if there's a connection there, then a lot of the times I still consider people herbalists, whether they've ever kept a rosemary alive or not.
Thank you for that. You just made my whole day. Like I'm getting there with the plants, but I'm not good with the plants yet, the actual plants.
And that's the beauty of this, is that, and this is how the kind of empathic herbalist title came to be for me, is that there's a lot of emotional connection to the different plants, and even plants that we can't ingest, there can still be an emotional and spiritual connection with those as well. So there's a lot of this kind of balance in my mind that comes from being able to connect with something that has been rooted into the earth. Right. That's the difference between plants and animals. And I eat meat sometimes, but I know a lot of people are vegetarian or vegan.
Right.
And there is a deeper rooted connection because these plants have physically been rooted in the ground. And so there's all these different ways. It's really hard to almost condense it down into a few minutes of explaining because there's all these different things. And I guess my main message is to encourage people, like, go out and check out books. There's all kinds of different free resources now. There's all kinds of herbalists out there talking. I have a YouTube channel. Like, there are plenty of people. You can go and you can look and get enough of the basic knowledge to be able to start working with plants. And if nothing else, go to your grocery store, find a tea that looks interesting, and try it and see what you think.
Yes. That
is the simplest, safest way to play with plants. Go to the grocery store and get you some tea. And you may not like the first couple that you try. Maybe the third or fourth one that really clicks with you. But then, look at the ingredient list. Is there something on here that like speaks to you? That kind of thing can help you start cultivating that relationship with herbs, even if you live in an apartment building and don't have time to keep up a potted plant on your balcony.
Right. Yes. I think tea is an absolutely great way to go when we talk about herbs, and some, there are some that are very earthy that people are like, oh, this is disgusting. But then you have ones like hibiscus that taste like fruit. You don't even need to put sweetener in that. It's so good, right?
Hibiscus and peppermint combined is one of my favorite things. And you can even do teas cold. So instead of brewing them hot, of course, here in Alabama, you're near me, I think.
Yes.
It is broiling still. And even though I still like my hot cup of tea in the morning, I put a couple of tea bags in a mason jar, fill it up with cold water, and stick it in the fridge overnight. I'm pointing this way because my fridge is stick it in the fridge overnight. And then you will have a cold brewed tea in the morning. There can actually be more minerals in a cold brew tea than in a hot brew tea. So you're getting different physical benefits, and you're also still able to have that energetic connection as well.
Yes. And you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me, and I haven't done this in a long time. Oh my gosh, I have to do this now. We used to make sun tea all the time when we were little, and put it in a jar and put it out in the sun and let the sun. I haven't done that in ages. Oh my gosh.
And some people do that with moon teas. I have several friends that they like to do things based on. Yes! And so they'll do like a full moon tea, or they'll do a new moon tea. And of course, at the point of the new moon, you're not really getting any kind of light infused, but there's still an energy feeling to that new moon, and that is being infused. You can put crystals beside the tea as it's infusing. I wouldn't put them in. There's some that you can, some that you can't. But just for the basic, understanding, like put the crystals up around your tea, and then you'll end up with a little bit of the vibration in that water, and you're getting a little bit of benefit there.
Yes. I love that. And I would say, this is the moon mama talking here. If you know that you do not do well when that Scorpio full moon comes, do not make Scorpio full moon tea and then drink it. Don't do it, people. Go for the moons that make you feel good and then make that tea. That one. This is from experience here. I'm sorry for everyone that had to deal with me when I drank that water. You're welcome. So
and that is something that's really like interesting, is keeping maybe even a journal.
Yes.
You may not realize it at first that there's certain times where you're getting like the Scorpio moon tea with you, like that, and if you will keep a journal where you're like, I tried this and this is how I felt, you may not recognize patterns to start with, but if you keep it with a consistent enough pace, 6 months in, you're going to go, wait a minute. When this is happening, this is what's going on. And of course, with the different moons, you're going to have to go for a couple of years before you really see a difference. Right. But you'll see the other smaller, more subtle patterns, very quickly if you're kind of keeping a journal.
Yeah. I know that one of the amazing ways that you can connect with herbs is to use essential oils. Now, we're going to make something with you guys at the end of the show. And in the show notes, we've put all of the ingredients that you're going to need. Is stuff that you probably already have around the house. You don't even need to worry so much about that. In fact, this is one of the first demos we've done on the show where I have not had to buy anything. I had everything already. So, so that was good. I like that. And so we're going to do that at the end of the show, but I wanted to talk for a minute about essential oils and the safety of them. There's a new wonderful documentary series that has come out on Netflix called Unwell. And when I saw it, I just saw it a couple days ago, and then I saw in the preview about essential oils pop up, and I said, well, I'm having Lara on the show, so I need to watch this. And I watched it this morning, and I feel a lot of things, and we could have a whole show. We could have a whole show on this, but let's can you give, I know that you watched the first episode that was all about essential oils. Do you have any main thoughts after watching that? Like, this is kind of a roundup of how I feel.
This has been the weirdest experience because I went into this show expecting it to be a major disaster one way or the other. I thought they were either going to completely and utterly try to discredit essential oils. And I say try because it's not, I actually, right before this show came out, started a blog on integrative aromatherapy. And so I was like, oh no. And then the other part of me was like, what if they go the other way with it and they're trying to like make it this cure-all? And in reality, the show does a really good job of kind of showing these different aspects. They show somebody who's using aromatherapy in kind of an integrative setting in a hospital. They show somebody who's using it in kind of a holistic setting, helping somebody with special needs. They show somebody who kind of has a religious slant on it, which is extremely popular and especially fun. And then they show somebody, there was another person. I'm actually going to do a YouTube video on this and put it up for everybody because there's so many things to unpack in this episode.
Yes.
It's hard to just split down. If you decide to watch this and you don't know anything else about essential oils, then take your time, watch it, but don't make significant judgments because, again, there's a lot to unpack. Oh, the other person's in the MLM group, so like the Young Living and doTERRA and things like that. And so there's a lot of aspects to this that become a problem, and the ethics of like if we're selling people essential oil set up. Hate using scheme because I'm trying to be, level playing field here. But if you're in that kind of pyramid setup and you're selling people essential oils, then at what point is it you're trying to make money and at what point is it helping people?
Right.
But this is the issue that we all have on some level. I have a master's degree I have to pay for.
Right.
My master's of public health and functional nutrition was not cheap. And so I do have to charge for my services.
Right.
But at the same time, the public health side of me is like, how do I make this accessible to everybody? And how do I serve people and not just get obsessed with, I got to have this much coming in per month. So it was that was interesting. It was really interesting to see a chiropractic doctor push so hard for ingestion of essential oils.
Right.
I personally believe that from my research and my clinical aromatherapy studies that you should not ingest essential oils unless you're working with somebody. And even then, I have never had to suggest somebody ingest essential oil.
Right.
When you are taking essential oils, if you were to take them internally, it would be like drinking just a ton of tea. They're highly concentrated. But there's also this other side to them where they are extremely effective at, when you inhale them, getting into your limbic system and helping to regulate emotions and the nervous system. And there's all these different things that we struggle with as a society. We struggle with the nervous system imbalances that come from eating a lot of foods that don't have a lot of nutrition and the stress of the go, go, go lifestyle, especially here in America. And so these essential oils, I think, are going to come to the forefront. And that's part of the reason that they made it into this documentary instead of just herbs. I know there's ayahuasca or whatever later, but the essential oils themselves got the first episode because they are going to be extremely helpful. But we have to be careful when we're using them, and we have to use some common sense.
Right. I agree with you 100% on the common sense. And also, it was through an MLM company that I got my first knowledge of essential oils and things like that. And they've been extremely helpful for me. That being said, there were a lot of things at the very beginning that were being taught to me that didn't seem or feel right to me. And so I've always just been very in touch with, that doesn't feel right. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to kind of go my own way with it. And I suppose in these instances where there's things being taught to you, I mean, it's good to be a little bit of the rebel and to say, this doesn't feel right, and I'm going to go ahead and do what does feel right to me. And so I still use the product because I think the product is really good, but I don't teach it in the way that I did it one time, because that's not what I feel like needs to be done. And like I said before, I've been working really hard at really, increasing my relationship with the herbs, with the oils, and making it an experience and a relationship, as opposed to, there's an oil for everything. I love the perspective that the one part that I loved about this whole episode 1 of Unwell on Netflix is that I feel like it was really where you can see it work really well is where it's integrative, where it's being used with other therapies, where it's part of a wellness plan. I think that's a huge part of it, right? Just being part of it.
You will find a lot of evidence-based practices using the words adjunctive therapy or complementary therapy. Alternative is now kind of being pushed to the side because it gives the kind of view that it means that it's an alternative to the mainstream options.
Right.
And in reality, it should complement the mainstream options. It should be integrated as an adjunctive therapy, is what you'll see a lot in the research.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to make our little project coming up here. But first, we're going to talk to our special guest today. And then we're going to be back at the end of the show to talk more with Lara and get into our recipe. All right. We'll be back in just a few minutes for more of the Breakthrough Show. We hope you've been enjoying the Breakthrough Show. If you're someone who is an inspirational entertainer or has an incredible story of breakthrough, we want to hear from you and maybe even have you on the show. Be sure to visit the links in our show notes to send us an email or connect with us on social media. We hope to see you on a future episode of the show. And now back to the Breakthrough. Welcome back, everyone, to the Breakthrough Show. My special guest today is very multi-passionate, very multi-talented, like most of our guests that come on this show. That's just what we do here. And she is a best-selling author. She is a coach. She has a PhD in drama. She has some funny videos out there. Go look it up. And so much more. Please welcome the author of Melting Ivory, Adrienne MacIain. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here and finally get to have this conversation because I've heard so many amazing things about your book, and I know that you're amazing at telling stories, and that's what we love on this show here, is getting the opportunity to hear stories as well. So thank you so much for spending your time with me today.
Well, I'm all about stories. That's my whole jam. So,
well, it's going to be great. Start out by telling us a story of what is bringing you joy in your life today.
Absolutely. So I'm so glad you asked me that question, actually, because yesterday I had this really interesting conversation with someone who I had a consultation with for branding, and they decided to go with somebody else. And then they called me later and said, I went with this other person and it was a disaster, and I probably should have gone with you, but here's why I didn't. I didn't go with you because your branding seemed to be kind of all over the place, which I thought was kind of ironic for someone who teaches branding. And I could tell from your consultation that you really knew what you were talking about and that you would do a great job with my branding. But for some reason, the fact that your branding wasn't on point really threw me off. And I really needed to hear that I really needed to hear that, because it's funny how we have a blind spot on our own stuff, right?
Yes.
It's so easy to tell somebody else, hey, here's what you should do. Here's the great advice that I should be taking myself, and somehow cannot.
Yes.
And so somehow hearing it from her, I was able to hear that and go, oh my gosh, of course. And it ticked something off in my head that I'd been thinking about for a while, and made me realize that I have a problem with two things, TMI and TMM. So TMI, of course, we all know what that is. Too much information, giving way too much personal information.
Yes.
I have this awful habit, like I'll sit next to a stranger on the bus and I will tell them my deepest, darkest secret, right? Just that's how I roll. Part of it, I think, is this thing of we have this shame that we carry around, and we want to just show it to somebody right away and see if it scares them off, right? Say, hey, this is the worst thing I've ever done. If you can handle that, we're good, right? And that doesn't always go over well for so many reasons.
Yeah.
I'm getting better about that, at learning who my shame story is for, right? And who it is not for. But I also have a problem with TMM, which is too many messages. Trying to pack too much into one story.
Yes.
Or into one website, or into one logo, right? So what I'm really trying to do now is to simplify and boil down to what is the core of what I'm trying to say, because that's what I help other people do. So I should, in theory, be able to do this for myself.
It's hard though, like you said,
It is so hard.
When you're in the midst of your own stuff, you can't see it. I actually was talking about this morning, because I play on Minecraft with my kids. I use this as an example. So we had found this island that we were like, we're going to populate this and we're going to make it great. And we had all of these ideas, but when you're building, you can only see like what's around you immediately. You have to fly up to be able to see the whole thing. And we don't have that ability as humans to just go, wee,
Yes. And that's why everyone needs coaching. Everyone needs help. I need help.
Yes.
And that was a big reminder to me, hey, you're not getting the help that you need with your brand. And so that was a big thing for me. So I'm going to be doing a consult today with my coach.
Yes.
To try to get that sorted. But it's amazing how, just that little outside perspective can make everything so clear.
That's a great thing to bring joy. And I think that realization is really good to have. I even just said to a friend recently, she was like, well, I said, I don't understand why you switched gears. Like, why did you switch paths? And she's like, well, I felt like I was the wrong one. I was on the wrong path. And I said, it's so funny because looking in, I felt like you were on the right one. Like it looked like everything you were doing was great. So it's so hard to see. And I think it's a great thing to the joy to experience when you're finally back on track of the
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And, I feel like my gift is, like you said, to be that drone, to be able to come up and hover over the bigger picture for somebody else and see what their message really is and what they're trying to convey. And that can bring them meaning and meaning to other people too, which is so important. But like you said, it's just while you're in it, when I wrote my book, I wrote it as a series of journal entries as it was happening. So then when I went back and tried to edit it, it was completely impossible for me, because I realized, well, all of this is important because it all happened like this. And so how can I tell this part of the story if I don't tell this part of the story, if I don't tell that part of the story? It was like impossible for me to kind of narrow it down. And so I had to have somebody else come in and read through the whole thing. And God bless this woman who was willing to read all of my journal entries from like 3 years of my life, right?
Yeah.
And narrow it down to, these are the characters that you actually need for the through line of the story. Everybody else has to go.
Yes.
And this is the main point of what you're trying to say here. This is your main message. And I was like, yes, thank you. That's what I've been trying to say.
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm the same way of the too many messages. I think some of us might have it within our being that we just want to save the world, and we want to take all the information that we have and we just want to throw it all out at one time, because, and so I need people like that too, to say, listen, Jessica, You're trying to say all the things again.
Uh-huh.
You know.
People can only hear one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And you can
Yes.
say that thing 3 different ways.
Mhm.
That's helpful. But if you say 3 different things in 5 different ways, then everybody's going, wait, I'm sorry, what are we talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. And then your good intentions, you intended to be helpful. You intended, and it ends up going the complete opposite way. And then it's like this cycle that keeps happening. And so, I know that you mentioned your book, Melting Ivory, it's called. Why is it, what is the significance of that title for you?
So most of it happens in Ivory Coast, in Côte d'Ivoire, in West Africa. And so it's a play on words on a number of levels. First of all, it's I was literally sort of melting a lot of the time because it's incredibly hot in West Africa. And I was white and everybody around me was not. And it was this, not just the whiteness of me, but the kind of protected innocence that I had come with melted away from me during that experience. This kind of, I had this idea that I was not racist. I had this idea that I was separate from my whiteness or from my Americanness. And I realized that you can't be. You are raised and you are a product of where you're raised and how you're raised. And it takes a concerted effort to not be racist. It takes a concerted effort to learn about other places and other cultures and empathize with them, even when you disagree very strongly with the way that they do things. And to be able to love those people and still not accept the way that they do things when you see that it's unjust. Because I saw a lot of mistreatment of women. I saw a lot of misogyny. And it was really hard for me. And so recognizing that, these people have such wonderful, amazing qualities that we don't have here, and vice versa. And that there is good and bad in everyone, everywhere. Everywhere. There are no good guys and bad guys. There are no good countries and shithole countries, right? There are just countries and people.
Yes.
And everywhere you go, you can learn something important. Everywhere you go, you can learn what not to do. And everywhere you go, you can help people just by being yourself and stop trying to be the way that they are. But bring the lessons of where you come from and say, this is how I do things. You can choose to learn from that, or you can choose to ignore it.
Yes.
And that's just the way it is. I can't change them and they can't change me, but at least by learning from each other, then we can both grow.
If that is not a whole word for today, we're done with the show. We're done. Done. That's it. That's it. It's a whole word for today. It's a whole word for this year. And so many, we've talked about this year enough already, but there's so many things that just ties into so beautifully with things that we've experienced around the world this year, and specifically in the United States as well. But it's a whole message, and I'm probably going to clip that out and put it in its own little thing for people to share forever and ever. But this book, I know you had lots of breakthroughs and lots of breakdowns. And tell us a little bit about the book, and also how those things, the breakthroughs and the breakdowns, tie in together for you.
I had breakdown after breakdown, which eventually led to a breakthrough, I would say. So I was in Ivory Coast mainly because I wanted to study their theater. But when I got there, I discovered that the theater that was there was not the one I had come to experience. I had come to experience theater in French that was kind of critiquing French values and French culture, because I had read some of that when I was back home. But when I got there, what I discovered is that they had had a real renaissance of their own forms of theater, these more oral traditions that were really about singing and dancing and performing with body language. And so it wasn't about the words. And I had come to kind of study the words. And so everything that I expected to happen was turned upside down. I was not expecting to fall in love, and I did that twice. I was not expecting to have to fight for the right to be with the person that I fell in love with, and I had to. I was not expecting there to be a coup d'etat that toppled the government while I was there, because it was the most stable country in the region at the time, and that's part of why I chose it. And yet I ended up getting shot at in a coup d'etat. And then I had to escape the country with this person that I had fallen in love with, and we had trauma bonded through this experience. And because of that, I was unable to see that he was playing out these same abusive patterns that were very normalized in his culture. And I, wanting to accept him, was accepting those patterns. And so I wasn't putting down boundaries, and I wasn't protecting myself from things that were harmful to both of us. And so I found myself in this incredibly dangerous and abusive situation where my life was being threatened regularly. And when you, like a frog in boiling water, look around and go, how did I get here?
Yeah.
It made me realize that I had been my whole life judging people who had ended up in abusive situations and thinking I was better than them, and thinking I was smarter than them, and thinking that I had some special secret that they didn't have that would prevent me from ending up in a situation like that. And I realized that's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just not true. Anyone can end up in an abusive situation. And it is incredibly difficult once you have accepted that pattern to get out of it. And so what I realized is that I needed help. I needed help to get out. And this is another theory, message that's going to come back here, because we all need help sometimes.
Right.
None of us can do it alone. It doesn't matter how beautiful and special and wonderful your gift is. You need other people to help you get that gift out there into the world. And so what I realized is that I needed help to get myself out of that situation. And I only realized that when that help was finally offered. And of course, I fought against it at first. I didn't want to get anybody else involved in this. But this amazing angel named Elizabeth, I was in graduate school at the time, and she was my office partner. And she saw what was happening. And she recognized it before even I did. And it's funny, my sister recently read the book, and she said to me, how did I not know? She had stayed up all night, like reading this book, and she called me at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my sister is not an early riser. And she said, how did I not know? Was I just an idiot? Was I in denial? Like what was going on that I didn't know this was happening to you? And I said, Kat, I didn't know, because I didn't want to see it.
Right.
Because then I would have to do something about it, and I didn't know what to do. And so when you find yourself in a situation like that, where you say, I know this is happening, but I don't know how to fix it. The only thing you can do is say, well, then I guess it's just not really happening. And of course, everything around me was telling me it's not happening. He was telling me it's not happening. He was gaslighting me. He was incredibly charming, and he had everyone in my circle convinced that it wasn't happening. The only one who saw through him was Elizabeth. She was the only one. And so she knew.
Let me just ask you really quickly, when she presented you, or when you had this conversation finally, that I'm assuming happened,
yes,
what was your response to that? Because you being in this place that, everything's fine, what was your response to that?
So it's funny, I've had 2 conversations like this in my life, where someone just at the right time asked me the right question, that I gave them the truth before I was able to stop myself. The first one was actually when I was anorexic. This is back in high school. And my health teacher asked me, are you having some issues with food? And I said, yes. And then I slapped myself like that to literally silence myself. And she saw that and said, did you see what just happened? And the exact same thing happened again. So Elizabeth asked me, hey, I don't know what's going on with you. She had tapped me on the shoulder and I kind of turned around like, this. So she knew that like something's up. And she had kind of suspected because he had come and like banged on the door and said, where's my wife? And so she said, look, I don't know what's going on. And it's really none of my business, but I'm studying abroad next semester. And I think you should sublet my apartment while I'm gone. It would help me out to have someone subletting my apartment. And I think it might be good for you too, to have a little space from whatever it is going on. And I said, thank you, but I can't. And she said, okay, why? And I said, because he would be so mad. And she says, oh, okay. So I need you to hear the words that just came out of your mouth. You didn't say, because everything's fine. Thank you. You didn't say, because I really love him and I want to work this out. You said, because he would be so mad. So now I know that you're being controlled by someone else. And I know that that's not okay. And so now I feel responsible for getting you out. And I said, no, you don't have to do that. You don't have to get involved. Please, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. And she said, no. See, this even convinces me more that you need help. You need out of this situation. And so now I'm the one who gets to help you out of that situation. And someday you're going to do this for someone else. And you're going to look back on this. This is me paying it forward. And so I didn't know what to say. I just said, thank you, and started crying. And she said, okay, so I'm not going to tell you anything, because if I tell you anything about the plan, he's going to get it out of you.
Right.
And I said, yeah, he is. That's what he does. And she said, so all you need to know is that you are going to get out of this. I'm going to get you out of this one way or another soon. But in the meantime, you have to stay alive. I just need you to do that for me. Can you do that for me? Can you stay alive? And I was like, I'll try.
Yeah. What an incredible person she is to
she passed away,
recognize.
unfortunately. Yeah, I know.
Well, her being there and not just recognizing what's going on, but acting in such a calm manner to understand what happens if she tried to recognize your patterns and to recognize his patterns and to say, I'm just not even going to tell you. This is just what's going to happen. What did you have any breakthroughs about relationships when it came to that whole thing, whether not just the relationship with the person that you were with, but friendships and family and other relationships? Like how did that change things for you?
It changed everything. I mean, honestly, it changed everything. Not right away. It took a while to unpack everything that had happened in the pattern and how I had played into that pattern, what my part in it was. Because for a long time, you can only kind of see yourself as a victim and feel sort of victimized and angry and sad and, hurt and all of this.
Right.
And then after a while, you start to see, well, wait a second. It wasn't just this one person. This pattern has happened a lot of times in my life. Now, not to that degree, but the common denominator here is guess who?
Right.
And so if I want this to stop, then I'm going to have to fix myself. I've been trying to fix these other people and failing. And guess what? That never works.
Right.
You can only fix you and they can only fix them. Now you can get help and you need help. You can't fix yourself by yourself. But it has to come from you, that impetus of, I want to change this. And so that's when I started seeing a counselor. That's when I started reading books and starting to understand where these codependent patterns come from and what my role was in enabling that abusive pattern. And so what I started to realize was that what I had been doing is either ignoring that I had boundaries or needs at all and saying, okay, because I was a victim of abuse when I was very young. I was about 4 years old. And I learned from that, unconsciously, of course, but I learned from that I am here to serve other people's pleasure. My pleasure doesn't matter. My pain doesn't matter. Other people's pleasure matters. Other people's pain matters. So I take their pain for them. And I didn't realize that because I was so small at the time.
Right.
It just became normal to me. And it's funny how when you kind of walk around the world with that attitude, people find you and they exploit it over and over again.
Right. Right.
And that becomes your normal.
Right, right. How did you, or did you have issues with staying out of the blame game with yourself? Because for me, like, I know that things that I've experienced, I've had a more difficult time of saying, yes, it's a pattern. Like, in that realization that it is a pattern with us, there comes all of this, well, why did I?
Oh, yeah.
And why did, did you have any issues getting out of that space of blame for yourself? Is that something you still struggle with now? Like, what does that look like for you?
Absolutely. Blame and shame, those are the two big ones. And it takes a ton of focus and work. And here's what it is. It's just compassion. It's self-compassion, recognizing, yeah, you made a mistake, but guess what? You were willing to forgive all kinds of crap that guy did to you. Why can't you forgive you? And that was a big, like, woo, for me to recognize, if I can have compassion for someone who tried to kill me over and over again, I think I can have compassion for me for getting into that situation and not leaving.
Right. Right. I mean, how is that we do that so often? We're so quick to forgive other people, but to forgive and love and appreciate ourselves on that same kind of level, I think is a life journey for some of us.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it goes back to that recognition that your needs are important. And to love yourself is to recognize, I do have needs and I do have boundaries and they are important. And it's my job to defend them and to communicate them clearly. And I think, what really changed for me in my life, and again, this changed everything, was recognizing that what I was doing was saying, if I recognized that I had a boundary at all, I was saying, hey, hi, excuse me. I'm sorry to bother you, but I have this boundary. So could you please take care of it for me? Thank you. So for example, if someone did something, let's say at work, that made me uncomfortable, I would say, hey, that made me uncomfortable. Could you please not do that again? Instead of saying, hi, that's not okay with me. If you do that again, here's what's going to happen.
Right.
That's a boundary. And that's defending your own boundary. You've communicated it clearly and you've let someone know what you're going to do to defend it. And it's amazing how it took me decades to understand that that's what a boundary is and that's how it works, right?
Yes. I mean, I can even look at that and see that in times when I've done that in my own household, because I'm such a peacekeeper. I have 6 children. And so it's like, it's constant like noise and bickering and all of this stuff going. So I'm like, I have to be the grounded one. I have to be the one to keep the peace. So it's like, can you please just not, instead of saying that same thing of no, that is not acceptable. And this is what's going to happen. I'm like, can you please just,
right.
Because I'm trying to keep the peace. And so I think there's so many different, there's many of us that could use that the whole just switching our language and and holding true to our boundary, right?
Well, and reclaiming your power and saying, you don't have to beg. You don't have to come begging and nagging, right? And that's the thing. It's like you come off as this sort of nag of like, hey, cut it out. Stop that. Instead of saying, okay, we have a rule about this. What's the consequence? Everybody knows it. Right? We've written it on the wall.
Yes.
And then it's not you. It's just, these are the rules that we've agreed upon.
Right.
Right? We've made an agreement as a family. Here's what's happened. Here's what happens when you fight with your sister. You have to go clean your room or whatever it is.
Yes.
But like there's a clear consequence and everybody understands it. And so then it's just behavior consequence. It's not personal. It's not, you're upsetting me. You're hurting my feelings. You're making me mad. No, it's just, here's the boundary and here's the consequence.
Right.
Simple.
Right. If someone is watching or listening right now and they're in the middle of having a really hard time, they're in the middle of a breakdown in their lives, and they can't see because we've been in those moments before, that it's very difficult to see. It's a bird's eye view again. If they're in the middle of that, they can't see that the breakthrough is going to happen. They can't see that they're going to get through. What would you say to them? Keep
going. Whatever you're going through, you have to get through it to get to the other side. The only way out is through. And the more you avoid it, the longer it will take. And so if you can face that thing head on, get support, get backup, get whatever you need to get behind you, but you need to fight your big boss battle to get to the next level.
What about for people that might be watching who know someone who is going through something that's a really big deal, and maybe they're not recognizing it? What would you say to them on how they want to help, but they don't know?
Yes, this is a really tricky one, because what we want to do is show someone, hey, here's what's going on. Okay. You can't do that. When you do that, it makes them double down. Right. And say, no, that's not what's happening. You don't know my life. And because it feels like an attack when someone says, you've gotten yourself into an abusive situation. And nobody wants to believe that about themselves. I didn't. I fought against that. Right. And so that's what puts you even deeper into denial, where you say, no, and you start defending them, and you start rationalizing and justifying their behavior toward you. And so in order to avoid the double down, what you need to do is focus solely on the person that you're talking to, not the behavior of the other person. That's irrelevant to this conversation. It's about, what do you need? What would make you happy? What do you want? What's important to you? What do you value? Get them to be strong in themselves and rediscover who they are and what matters to them, because in a situation like that, you lose all of that. You lose all of that. And your entire existence is just appeasing this other person and becoming what they need you to be. And so if you can get that person to reconnect with who they are and what they want and what they need, you can get them to start to recognize, wait a second, I'm not getting my needs met in this situation. I'm trying to communicate to this person what I need, and they're not listening to me. They're manipulating me and trying to get me to back down. But you have to get them to see that. You can't tell them that, because it will just go in one ear and out the other. Right. And so again, the focus is on empowering that person to come back to themselves and see things clearly for themselves, and keep telling them, I'm here for you. I will back you up. I will support you in whatever you decide. You always have a place if you need a place to go. I will protect you. I will help you. And if you see an opportunity to actually get someone out, if they finally come to that realization themselves that they need to leave, that's when you can do what Elizabeth did for me, where you say, okay, I'm getting you out of this. But you can't do that until they come to that themselves. Right.
That's the hard part sometimes for the ones that want to help, that want to fix, or they're like, why? But it was very similar situation for me, where people were like, well, we tried to tell you. And
oh yeah,
I wasn't in a place to hear that.
No. And again, the more someone tries to tell you, it feels like, and I told you so, you know, and it feels like, well, you're not me. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yep. This whole talk has been a word today. And I would encourage everybody to go out and get Melting Ivory. Can you tell everybody where they can get that, where they can connect with you, and anything else you'd like to leave us with today?
Absolutely. So you can get the book on Amazon. It's on Kindle and it's in paperback. And you can look me up by name, or you can find me on that'sallowed.com, and allowed is spelled ALOUD. That's my website. You can find my podcast there, which is the That's Allowed podcast. My podcast is where I help people tell the stories that they're not yet telling. Because again, a lot of these stories get blocked by shame, by blame, by, I want to help people get their stories out there, because your story matters and your message matters. So that's what I do.
I love it. I think that's a great platform to have available for people, because I think that you're so right that so many times, stories aren't being told. And we know on this show that telling stories is how it's a completely two-way thing, where it helps you to therapeutically go through, everything that you've been through. But through that, you're helping other people to not feel alone, to find some way that they can get through things. And I love that storytelling is so symbiotic. It's so just helps both people that are, whether you're the teller or the listener, right?
Well, I always tell people a story that's trapped inside of you colors everything you see and do without you realizing it. But once you get that story outside of yourself, then it becomes a thing outside of you that you can use to help other people.
Yes.
So that's why I help people tell stories.
I love it. Adrienne, thank you so much for being here today and spending your time with me. Really appreciate it. And I know so many people are going to, this is going to be life-changing for some people. I know it.
I hope so.
All right, guys, we're going to be back in just a minute with more of The Breakthrough Show. Hey, Jessica Dugas here, creator, producer, and host of The Breakthrough Show. We have big goals here at the show in the desire to change the world one Breakthrough Show episode at a time. And honestly, we couldn't do it without you. We want to take this moment to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters for helping us to not only expand the show, but spread its message far and wide. If you're not a supporter yet, we would love to have you. You can choose any tier with tons of benefits at patreon.com/The Breakthrough Show. We can't wait to have you part of our Breakthrough Show family. And now back to the show. Welcome back to The Breakthrough Show. I'm back with my guest today, Lara Guthrie. Okay, you guys, I've been calling her Lara the whole episode, and I think that's the New England coming out in me. Like, it's just Lara's here. So Laura's back. I don't know if we can just keep it. Who's been keeping a tally of how many times I've screwed up names this season? I don't even know. I should have done. I'll give out a prize if somebody can tell me. But we are going to be making something today together. And again, the ingredients for this recipe are down in the show notes. So be sure you check that out. What are we making today, Laura?
You're going to do a body scrub. Real simple, real easy. You can pretty much use anything you've got in your kitchen to make it happen. I've got some suggestions about maybe adding a little coconut oil and things like that, but it doesn't have to be done that way. So I think you'll find that this is a real easy recipe. You're not going to get too much of the essential oils in there unless you dump the whole bottle in, but I know you guys won't do that. So.
Be careful. Go easy with the essential oils, people. We just had this conversation. If you're just joining the show, if you happen to be live right now and you just joined, rewind to the beginning of the episode and then come back. All right. So tell us what we need. What do we need to get started here?
So you're going to want some sort of sugar. You're also going to want some oil. So you can use something like olive oil if the smell doesn't bother you. And if some people can't stand it, grapeseed, like what Jessica's got, is amazing. And then I encourage you to get a little bit of coconut oil. We're not going to have to put much in there, but it needs to be the solid kind. I like that she's got the cold pressed and unrefined version because you know it's got all the good little ingredients in it. But that will help to kind of solidify it a little bit and keep you from having to stir it every time you try to use it. The other thing is I've got Body Calm, but you can use any kind of essential oils you want. Any blend is okay. Or if you've got your own individual essential oils and want to blend them together, I'd love to come back sometime and talk about blending, because there's all kinds of easy ways. And then I'm actually going to use some carrier oil that has a blend of the oils like the olive and the grapeseed and things like that.
Awesome. And I think, so for my oils, I'm going to use turmeric and vetiver today. Can you talk really quickly about maybe what a benefit of those would be?
So the thing that you want to remember is, even though you will hear people talk about turmeric and the turmeric essential oil, they're going to have slightly different, like the turmeric herb versus the essential oil, they are going to have slightly different properties, but they are still both very anti-inflammatory. And I love vetiver because it's very grounding. So one of the things that I talk about when I do a class on blending essential oils is things like the fruit smells, sweet orange, grapefruit, there's lemon, all these different, they are going to have kind of an energizing, they're going to add energy.
Right.
Whereas you may need things that are more calming or grounding, such as the earthy kind of vetiver, sandalwood, that kind of thing. Or you could need something that kind of helps to lift you up. Maybe if you're like me, I'm Capricorn, and I'm Capricorn through and through. And so I need a lot more of the like geranium, jasmine, those kind of floral scents. So kind of noticing the scent families that make you feel certain ways. And then also the scents that you like in those scent families can help you kind of pick out the oils that you want to keep with you at all times.
I like that too. Take the time, to go through some different scents and see what feels really good to you. I briefly mentioned it in the beginning of the show about the experience I had with when it smelled really good. It turned out that the healing properties of that particular one was something that my body needed at the time. So a lot of times what you're drawn to is what you need, right?
Exactly. So really all you have to be able to put this together is a bowl, something to stir with, and your jar. Oh, my jar went the other direction. You can pick any size jar, because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about parts instead of talking about direct measurements.
Okay.
So for instance, in this recipe, we're going to use 1.5 parts sugar to 1 part oil to start. And what that means is if you were going to do 1.5 cups sugar, you would do 1 cup oil. But you could even make it as small as like a teaspoon, 1.5 teaspoons sugar to 1 teaspoon oil. So that's all a part is a piece of a ratio. And that way you can pick any jar that you want, any size that you want, and you can use this recipe to get yourself to that point of being able to use to whatever size you need.
Okay.
Great Christmas.
We don't, if I have like an extra, cause I have extra big jars. If I'm using an extra big jar and I'm just making a little bit, can I mix it in there and just keep it in there? Do I need a bowl too? Okay. Good. Yay. Let's get started. Tell us what we need to do.
Okay. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to actually mix your oils together. So again, if you're wanting to do like 1.5 cups sugar to 1 cup of oil, then you're going to take some of your oils, whatever those may be. And I would do 3/4 cup of your liquid oil to 1/4 cup of the coconut oil.
Okay. So I'm doing 3/4 cup of my grapeseed oil here. And then 1/4 cup of the coconut oil.
And the more you do this and the more you play with it, the more you're going to like recognize that it's not always exactly the right ratio. You may have to play with it some. And that's the beauty of herbal stuff in my mind, is that you can play with this. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be time. Do the ratio, and then you may find that you need to add a little more of something or a little something else. But then you're just going to mix it. Just going to start mixing it up a little bit. The coconut oil has to break up as much as possible. Otherwise, you're just going to have little lumps of coconut oil. You can do this in a blender, but if you put it in a blender or you put it in a food processor, be careful that you don't heat it up too much because you can lose some of the good benefits of the oil.
And we have to be careful too, right, of using, if we're using too much of essential oils in something that's maybe like a plastic container, right? We need to be, I like the idea, I think, of having, like, if we're going to be doing these often, to maybe having maybe a little NutriBullet or something that's just for the oil, so that we're not then having all of this in our food too.
Exactly. And again, I pretty much always do it by hand. I know not everybody has a lot of time, but it doesn't, I mean, you can see we've just been talking a couple of minutes and it's already pretty well blended. And again, going back to the whole like energy thing, you're adding your energy. If you're into Reiki, for those of you who know what Reiki is, the energy healing, then you may find that you're channeling some Reiki into it while you're doing it.
Yes.
You know? There's all kinds of little things like that you can be doing that if you slap it in a NutriBullet for a couple of minutes, doesn't necessarily work as well.
You got to put the love in it, people. Put the love in it.
Put the love in it. That's the important thing. So once you're done with that, then you can put some sugar in. Again, we're doing about 1.5 cups to the 1 cup of oil. Lots of math, but it's okay. And then you're going to fold okay, I don't know if you guys have ever watched that show Schitt's Creek, where they're like, fold it in, fold the cheese in. Like, what does that even mean? You're just going to gently kind of turn the sugar over into the oil and fold the sugar into the oil.
Yes, because it seems like that's a lot of sugar for the oil, but you're going to see it like start to come together, right? Like you can already see like it's starting to.
Now, some people put their essential oils in with the regular oil and then they add the sugar. I prefer to add the oils after we've put the sugar in, because we just want to add a little bit at a time and then get to the level of scent that we're after.
I love that because you can add, but you can't take away.
Exactly. You can add all day long. And the thing is it's like a haircut. You may keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and eventually you have like a Backstreet Boys bowl cut, right? Well, the same thing, like it's like the opposite with the sugar. One time I just kept adding, and I added too much essential oil, and then I'd add a little more sugar and oil, and by the end of it, it was like this huge thing. What am I going to do with all of this? You know, it kind of, turns into this. Another thing that you may want to remember when you're doing this is that your utensils, your bowl, your jar, whatever you're using, need to be very dry. You don't need any water in this, because the water can make the oils ruin faster. So we don't want, if you've got to wash a bowl to be able to do this, wash your bowl, dry it out, let it sit for a few minutes before you start putting any oil in it to make sure there's no moisture left. Another thing that you can do, variation on this, you can actually add like some Epsom salts. I like to get the Epsom salts with the Himalayan salt. You've got some minerals and things of that nature that you can put in there. So there's all kinds of ways that you can play with whatever is in this scrub.
And this is really, you guys, this is even the process of making it. Like we just talked about, you're infusing it with your own energy and loving on it. But it's really a relaxing thing too here, you guys. If you're just sitting here and mixing things, like don't feel like you need to rush through it. Like just, pretend like you're at the beach and you're a child and you're playing in the sand and you're mixing in the waters. Like I'm just sitting here. We'll be recording for the next 2 hours and I'll still be mixing this. we could get some lovely ASMR videos going on.
Yes. But there is a mindfulness component to this.
Yes.
And this is okay to touch. Like, if you're making it for yourself, you can put your hands in it and run your fingers through it and mush it, whatever you feel like. It's not, if you're making it for grandma for Christmas, you might not want to, but
Yes.
for your own stuff, like, you can use this as a mindfulness exercise of feeling the oils and the sugar or the salt. You can put the essential oils in it and notice the smells. A lot of mindfulness practices, we're talking about what we feel with the senses to stay in that moment, and this is a great way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, even if you think about when great grandma used to make the homemade bread, and she would be kneading it and kneading it and kneading. And I am such a big proponent. Like, my husband and I will say, if the kids are wanting to make dinner that night, we always say, put some love in it. Like, if you're in a bad mood, don't cook dinner. Don't do it, because honestly, it's like you're eating that energy. And so it's the same thing. If you guys think about, our skin is our largest organ. So if you're using these scrubs and these salts to soak in, and you're just, in an angry mood, like chopping away the oil here, you probably don't want to be rubbing that on. Be in a good mood when you're doing this, people.
So now what we're going to do is add some essential oils, and less is best when it comes to this. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to dump half of our essential oils in there. It's not going to take much to get the smell that we need. So what I always do with about this level of mixture, which is 1.5 cups of the sugar and 1 cup of oil, I'm going to add in maybe about 10 drops of essential oils to start, mix it up, and then add more if I feel like it needs it. Another thing that you can consider when you're doing this is changing the blends up. So like what Jessica's doing is 5 of turmeric and 5 of vetiver. Sometimes you might try maybe 6 of vetiver and 4 of turmeric, or vice versa, just to kind of see how the different ratios change the way that it smells. Just, something fun to play with.
Okay, so this is smelling super earthy.
So if it's too earthy, you might look at something kind of spicy to blend.
Oh, that's a good idea. It's playtime for adults. That's what it is. And speaking of adults, it's also really, it's so much fun for me to get the kids involved with it too, of just doing that, where sometimes, if they say they're having trouble sleeping or whatever, and I know that they're not being very calm at the moment, which happens in a house with 6 children. But, I might pull out a couple different oils and say, hey, which one of these smells good to you? And just that, asking them what smells good is helping them, because they're getting the aromatherapy from it, right?
Exactly. And that's how they're kind of using it now in the integrative sphere, is they're using it where they're letting people pick the ones that they like. And I think even just the inhalation of each of the different ones. So for instance, you might have lavender, sweet orange, and marjoram, maybe the 3 that you take, and you say, smell this, what do you think? Smell this, what do you think? Smell this, what do you think? They may specifically pick one of them, but they've also got a little bit of that residual benefit from the others. So even just smelling a little bit can be helpful.
You don't need to leave this episode thinking about essential oils and being afraid of oh God, now I don't know what to use, and I don't know and I have a cat and I have kids, and don't feel, there are lots of people out there like Laura, like myself, like there's plenty, and that you can go to and say, hey, like, what's a good rule of thumb with this, that'll be happy to help you out with some information. Thank you so much for sharing this recipe with us. When we go to use this, should we just dump the whole jar on ourselves, or what are we doing here?
So if you've never had like a sugar scrub before, you just take some out and you rub it on your body for the exfoliation. I like to start outward and work my way in. So it almost becomes like a lymphatic brushing as well. So your lymphatic system, if you will just gently, you're not trying to dig in, but if you're just gently, rubbing along your arms, that's kind of helping the lymphatic capillaries with the action of pulling the lymph back and recycling. And this can be very helpful with immune function. That's the main thing I think that the lymph system is really helpful for. There's other side things as well, but that's the way I like to use it and you start at your feet and work your way back up towards your torso. So it's out to in action, just very short, gentle brush strokes. And that will give you the exfoliation on your skin, but it'll also help to support the lymph system.
Love that. Great tip, especially when, we've all been having at the forefront of our mind about our immune systems this year. So that's wonderful. I love that that's some of what our different demos and conversation has gone to, is supporting our immune system. You've got all you need in the Breakthrough Show this year, you guys. Laura, tell everybody where they can find you and what you've got going on right now.
So if you go to empathicherbalist.com, you will find all of my information. I do one-on-one consultations over Zoom. I also have an integrative aromatherapy blog. I encourage you to check that out. The YouTube link is there as well. I've been doing a lot of DIY stuff, and I am actually going to be dropping a video of me reacting and kind of dissecting some of what this first episode of Unwell talks about. It was just, I was going to just write a blog post. And the longer it went, I was like, I can't do this on a blog post. I'm going to have to do a video. So y'all be looking out for that too.
Yes, it's going to be amazing. And we're going to be sure to have that link once she gets it out on her guest page on thebreakthroughshow.com. So you can always be able to go back and refer to that as well. I do think that I think this series is going to be good for people to look at different things maybe that they haven't considered before, but also to open our minds a little bit, to remember, like you've talked about today, using your intuition, creating a relationship to whatever modalities you're using. And this is not a fling. This is not an overnight thing. Make that relationship right. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. It's been awesome to have our amazing guests here today. Special thank you to both of our guests today. It has been an amazing show. Up next week on The Breakthrough Show, we have two amazing men. We've got first coming up, we have Mr. Mini Golf, you guys, Carl Barth. He was actually on the ABC hit Holy Moly 2 this last season in his money shirt. It was epic completely to watch it, but you're going to find out about who the heck does he think he is to create a business around mini golf. And then we'll also talk sharks and dolphins with an amazing entrepreneur, Tom Matson. You guys are going to love this episode. These guys are on fire and it's going to be so much fun. Until next week, guys, please take a moment to rate, subscribe, comment, and share where available, and make today a great day for a breakthrough. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Breakthrough. Please visit our website at www.thebreakthroughshow.com. And be sure to join our After the Breakthrough community powered by Patreon. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place for another inspiring episode.